Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm your host, Matthew Petrusik. Today, we are bringing you the second half of a conversation that Bishop Barron had with Brenden Thompson during a trip to London. Brenden is program manager of the Word on Fire Institute in the United Kingdom, where he works to promote the faith in a deeply secularized culture. In this conversation, they explore Bishop Barron's unique methods for public speaking and preaching, among other related topics. Enjoy.
So we're going to just move now to talking about our week here in London.
Yeah,
so
good.
we've been preparing for it for longer than expected.
Yeah.
So we were meant to have it in September gone, and you were there in Rome on the Thursday,
Yeah.
and then later that evening the Queen died.
The Queen died, yeah.
I remember talking to your brother John on the phone. I think you were in a restaurant in Rome. And
We were in a restaurant with my brother and Father Paul Murray. I don't know if your listeners know him, but a great spiritual teacher at the Angelicum in Rome, an old friend. And we were out for dinner. And before dinner, he said, I said, the Queen evidently is quite ill. And he said, I'm sure she'll be, she'll survive for many more. And then in the course of that dinner, we got the word that she had died. And so it was difficult, but it was the right decision not to come because, that week was very chaotic here. And so anyway, rescheduled for now, and here we are.
Yeah, and it's been a fantastic start. So at this point, we had Parliament on Monday. So you had a tour of Parliament, but you'd never had a tour of Parliament before. Just share with us a little bit of your impressions.
I loved it. I was saying to someone this morning, it really was one of the most memorable days of my life yesterday, because I love history and I love, British history and all that. And I'd been around Parliament. I've certainly been in Westminster Abbey, et cetera. I'd never been inside the Parliament building, and every room, not only are they stunningly beautiful rooms, but with so much historical resonance. So you walk into Westminster Hall and that's where Thomas More, was tried. And then you go next door to what was the chapel, but it's where the House of Commons met, like at the time of the American Revolution. And Edmund Burke would have, been arguing his position in that room. And then you cross over into the present House of Commons that had been destroyed during the Second World War and then rebuilt. But Churchill would have been, in this place. Then you go across and there's the House of Lords and there's that gilded throne. And I mean, there's so much resonance. And speaking as an American, obviously we broke from what do I say, England, Great Britain, the UK. We broke from you guys, but at the same time, we're all in a way culturally English. I mean, we're so influenced by English history and so on. So to go into a place like the Parliament is very moving. I found it very moving. And then the chance to give the talk there to that marvelous audience last night, including several MPs, it just made it one of the most memorable days of my life.
Yeah, it was a packed crowd, and I think there was at least 20 members and peers of all houses, Catholic, Christian, and we took as a theme for that. So Pope Benedict had given a historic address when he visited for the papal visit in September 2010. And the theme of the speech, really, there's a line in it. He said, religion isn't a problem for legislators to solve, but a vital contributor to the national conversation. It's an excellent speech, well worth reading. And so we're kind of playing with those themes. What is it that you hope to say to them, or what were you trying to say in that speech?
I think just to remind everybody of how Christianity is so deeply ingrained in our culture. That we've been shaped willy-nilly by it. I mean, whether we know it or not, it's in the cultural DNA of anyone who's been influenced by Christianity. I closed the speech, and I was very happy. I think he was a peer, you say, right, from the House of Lords. There was an older gentleman. And I had made reference to the Union Jack. And I said, which, as I look out over the Houses of Parliament, hovering over the whole thing is the Union Jack, which is 3 crosses kind of interposed on each other, right? I said, how odd when you think about it, that central to this national symbol is the instrument of torture on which a young Jewish rabbi is put to death around the year 30 AD. That's the image, that's the symbol that we have, and how deeply strange that is. And it speaks to the distinctiveness, the uniqueness, the wonder, the odd quality of Christianity that holds God became one of us, died for us, was raised from the dead. That reality is in the flag, which hovers over the whole of the British establishment, you know. And I remember he said to me, I've been in this house, you know, for 40 some years, and I've never thought of the Union Jack that way. And I thought, okay, that's the point I wanted to make. That's what I wanted to convey.
And that's the job of a great preacher, isn't it? Because there's so much within a church, but it's a kind of, they lack potency if a preacher can't bring them to life to say what is what is the fact. It's almost kind of just preaching reality as it ought to be seen, in a sense. So the kind of that kind of prophetic role of preaching.
One thing I was very happy to be able to begin the speech with Gandhi, and I mentioned sometimes it takes the outsider to look at a text with really fresh eyes. That Christians have been reading Matthew 5, 6, and 7, you know, for centuries and centuries. And turn the other cheek and resist not evil and love your enemy, etc. And it become, maybe kind of a banal abstraction for a lot of Christians. But Gandhi, reading it for the first time, it took his breath away. And he realized, this is fresh, this is new. This is something that could actually work. And then by God, he proved that it could work. And then he was imitated by some of the key players in the 20th century, from King to Tutu to John Paul II. And what I argued last night was, that's the dynamite of the church. That's the power of the church. And Gandhi, the outsider, saw it. But he helped Christians to realize, oh yeah, that is at the heart of our great message. And then I tied it to the doctrine of creation and God making the world through a nonviolent act, tied it to the ethic of the sermon, and then finally to the Paschal mystery, the dying and rising of Jesus. And I guess I wanted to do in a way what Gandhi did for his Christian audience. I hadn't thought of it that way, or I'm seeing it with a fresh perspective. That was my goal last night.
And it's revealing of blind spots. I think one of the things, there's a concept called the curse of knowledge. So it's like the longer that you've participated or studied in something, the harder it is to remember what it was like before.
Yes.
And how much of evangelization is impeded because we don't realize what we don't know. These blind spots exist. That kind of sense of the curse of knowledge. How do we help people? How do we help evangelists actually to get over the curse of knowledge?
I mean, how awful that Christianity has become for many Christians a kind of tired old Christianity. Oh yeah, that's Christianity. Where Christianity is, when you get it, it's always fresh and always strange and always unnerving, and it compels you to see in a completely different way. Paul saying, I know one thing, Christ in him crucified. It. What? That would have struck them as the oddest possible thing to be proclaiming. You're proclaiming someone who was crucified? And then so to get that, what's at stake there? Why he could say it with such blithe confidence? It's only in light of the resurrection. And Jesus Christ is Lord. We say, oh yeah, Jesus Christ is Lord. It's a nice, pious, spiritual sentiment. That was a bomb going off in the ancient world when Caesar was the Lord. And these first Christians with no army behind them, no institutional support whatsoever, were blithely saying, no, Jesus is Lord. That's why they all ended up in prison, or most of them ended up killed, because the powers that be knew exactly what they meant. Well, the fact that we've lost that we would never hear a phrase like Jesus is Lord and say, yeah, ho-hum. That we wouldn't hear that and say, that's a revolution. That's an explosion. So that's part of what I want to recover, is that very liberating oddness of Christianity.
Mm. And I think that kind of links in with in a sense, odd figure to English people. If you're not Catholic, this kind of figure of Thomas More. It's a big theme of your week here. I think I hadn't watched A Man for All Seasons until you'd spoken about it. I think you're saying it was your favourite film.
Yeah,
you kind of watch it periodically. So, what does Thomas More mean to you? And we're going, of course, to visit his cell in the Tower of London this week. We're going to have a reception at the Great Hall Lincoln's Inn, where, as a young lawyer, he was received to the bar in the 15th century. So what does Thomas More mean to you?
It means a lot to me, and it began with the movie. So I would have seen A Man for All Seasons when I was 16, probably for the first time. Maybe a high school teacher of ours showed it to us, I forget. But I've watched it, no kidding, every single year of my life since then. When I was a professor at the seminary, I would always have a little evening on his feast day. I'd invite, it was during the summer, so the fellow faculty members come to my room and watch Man for All Seasons. I always showed it to my students during the school year. And, Paul Scofield, the great Shakespearean actor, plays More in such a memorable way. So in my imagination, of course, I know the great Holbein portrait. I know what the historical Thomas More looked like, but I always think of Paul Scofield. And I always think of the figure from that play. And I could probably recite most of that play by memory, by heart. And it had a huge impact on my own thinking and my own prioritization of values. It's a prime example of a saint teaching Christianity more than the theologians do, even as I reverence theology, but a saint teaches you what it's about. And that image of Schofield playing More still, sings to me. So that's how More came to mean a lot to me.
And one of the elements of this week that I'm really looking forward to is we're doing a conference on the theme of sharing the church's story. And I think in many ways it's a significant moment in England for the UK, because since the pandemic, I would say it's probably going to be one of the largest gathering of Catholics in the UK. So we're so grateful to have you there. But I think your address, you're going to speak about the role of the laity in evangelization. So what is it you're going to say?
Well, maybe just stay with Moore for a second, because he's a great layman. He's not a priest. He thought he might want to be a priest as a young man, and he always had an intense spirituality, but precisely as a layman, precisely as someone in the world. So Moore, as a lawyer, and then as a politician, then as a statesman at the highest level, becomes Lord Chancellor of England, so the highest appointed position in the realm. A literary figure of great significance, known throughout Europe, Utopia and other works. He's a model of Christian humanism. That there's something beautiful about the monastic or Carthusian life and all that, but Moore exhibits the lay style, to use Baltzar's language, the lay style of being a Christian in the world. And that's super important now. And see, look at Vatican II, the universal call to holiness. The call of the laity is now to sanctify the seculum, the secular order. So the order of politics and law and science and entertainment and business, finance. That's not my job as a priest or a bishop. That's the laity's world. Now go forth and Christify it. Well, see, Moore knew that in the 16th century. Moore understood that in his bones. And then the other side of it, he lived that life as richly as it could be lived, but he knew, okay, push has now come to shove, because I cannot stay in this position and be true to my conscience because of what Henry VIII is doing, because of the moves Henry VIII was making. Moore knew, I can't with integrity continue. And then he, resigned from that life, and then paid the ultimate price for that integrity. So he's in both those ways such a model of a lay commitment to the world.
One of our great patrons for Catholic Voices is John Henry Newman.
Yeah.
And just seeing the kind of links there between kind of conscience and when he converted in 1845 and stuff. I think his sister never spoke to him again. That sense of there's a real English theme. What's your sense in the UK for Catholics, having to make those kind of conscientious decisions? How can figures like Newman and Moore help lay Catholics as, they kind of feel at the coalface? That's what prevents us from doing evangelization, right? It's the sense of the fear of what's going to happen with this. What would your advice be to Catholics to encourage them?
Yeah, because you're right. Newman didn't pay the ultimate price the way Moore did, but he paid a price by God. He paid a huge price by becoming a Catholic, and then he lost the world that he moved in so comfortably. Think of Newman prior to 1845 is a major player, in the establishment life here in England. And then he had to give most of that up. He recovered it by the end of his life in a way, after the Apologia Pro Vita Sua, and he becomes sort of a revered elder figure. But he did sacrifice a lot to be a Catholic. I find whenever I come here to England, it always strikes me how alive the 16th century is. Whenever I move in Catholic circles here, we're never far from Tyburn. We're never far from the great sacrifice of the martyrs. It's still very much a lively, proposal in people's minds. Okay, that's in a way that's a gift of grace, isn't it? Because from those figures you take courage, seems to me. That you can and should be Catholic despite any opposition. We're not facing what Edmund Campion faced. we are facing opposition, from a secular culture.
So polite persecution.
Yeah, but it is a real persecution. The secular world is often hostile to us, stands athwart our purposes. We face, ridicule sometimes and contempt. Okay, well, heck, we can handle that. If Thomas More could face the chopping block and Edmund Campion could face, Tyburn Tree, we can certainly face a little, public opposition. So maybe, especially here, to take courage from these great figures.
So thank you so much, Bishop Barron, for joining us. And I want to give the last word to Newman in a sense, because I think it's quite central to both the missions of Catholic Voices and Word on Fire is this sense of emancipated laity. Newman in the 19th century was saying, I want an educated, well-instructed laity. I wish to enlarge their knowledge, to cultivate their reason, to get an insight into the relation of truth to truth, to learn to view things as they are. What are the bases and principles of Catholicism? And 150 years later, I still think in many ways we're trying to live up to that vision. And of course, I think I'm grateful in the way that Catholic Voices helped me to do that, and Word and Fire has really inspired me, inspired millions around the world to do that. So just so grateful to you, Bishop Barron, for joining us today, for being in London for this week.
My pleasure.
And all the fruits that it will have. And thank you all for watching. God bless.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content, please remember that there is much, much more available inside the Word on Fire Institute. The Institute is an interactive online Catholic community now nearing 30,000 members strong who have the common goal of evangelizing the culture for Christ. Join us today at institute.wordonfire.org. That's institute.wordonfire.org. God bless you, and we'll see you again soon.